Is it just the two of us, or there's
No, there is the two of us. That's it. You and me.
again? Huh?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Phenomenal. It's interesting how much light the sun gives out.
I know.
I'm just trying to make this so it's stable. Okay, well, welcome to the HVAC Game School Community Weekly Live Call. And today we are at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is why it's dark out. And I just got home, but basically, we're still on it's not a drive to work Wednesday, but it's a drive home from work Wednesday, I guess. Um, yeah, so do we have any community questions or anything?
No. Mm-mm. No.
No
Nothing.
community questions. Oh,
No.
okay. And we changed the meeting to the night because people said they were going to be able to attend. And I thought they might have some questions, but okay, well, it might be a quick meeting. I have two topics that I can um, take up. The first one is a little bit shorter, and the second one is a little bit longer. So I'll take up the first one first.
Okay.
I mean, the shorter one first. I'll take up the shorter one first.
Oh, okay.
And that is on the topic of making mistakes. And
Okay.
as an HVAC technician, I don't think there is a single HVAC technician on this planet that has never made a single mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And even for me, at this point where I'm 10 years into the trade, almost 11, I still make mistakes and it makes me feel really stupid. And since I also record a lot of what I do, and if I make a mistake, then a lot of people notice and say stupid things about it. So whatever I do is even more magnified and taken like
Oh,
it's made bigger, you know. So I just recently in the last few weeks had several videos that I posted where people said that I make mistakes and I call things the wrong way, and it makes me feel really bad internally because obviously I'm also trying to relay the knowledge that I have. And if I make a mistake or I say something wrong and then somebody watches it and they take it for a fact, then that is not only me bringing negativity to another place, but it's also like bringing incorrect information, you know?
mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to take it up because um, I was doing a video on fall PMs and I was indicating about the inspecting the heat exchanger on when you have gas burners, you have the burners and you have the heat exchanger. They're two separate components. But for me, first of all, the way I learned, I just learned by doing mostly. And I had a little bit of people teaching me stuff here and there. And I picked up stuff online on calls, and which is also why I'm trying to do this community to help people starting out get knowledge faster. So there's two things here. Um, I was basically covering heat exchangers and talking about rust and looking for holes and broken heat exchangers, but I called them burners and I referred to the entire assembly as burners. But the burners are literally where the gas mixes with the air and it burns. And you don't want the carbon monoxide going into the space. So they built these metal tubings that is called a heat exchanger because that's what it does. It exchanges the heat from the flame from the burner and the heat travels in the heat exchanger. And then you have the blower motor that blows the air across the heat exchanger, picks up the heat and heats up the space that way. So for me, it's the 2 points that I I know there's a difference, but for me, it's just a burner. It heats up stuff, so that's how I think about it. And it's two separate components. So I, in my mind, know it is separate, but I don't really distinguish it that much because if one doesn't work, the other one doesn't do its job either. And also, you have the fact that you have new technicians starting out, and there's so much lingo that you have to learn that I feel like if you start overwhelming somebody who's just starting out in the trade, with all the words for every single component, it might be too much to just start out. And it might be a wrong assumption, but I rather start out slow and correct things as I go. That's just my philosophy. that I just go for it and I just do it and I figure it out. But it was a good point because it is two separate components there. You have the burners and you have the heat exchanger, and I messed that up. And now I'm going to be more precise about it. But also, if you're starting out, if you're calling the whole thing a burner, I don't know if it's like, if it's going to make a difference in the way you act in the field. And that's really what I think is the most important thing, that you know what you're doing in the field and that you take care of the customer and you do a good job. So that was one thing. Another thing was where I was wiring heating elements for a regen freezer. And some freezers have them wired for 120, some freezers have them wired for 208. And sometimes it can be confusing. And I had spent an entire day, I was on this call, I think for 8 to 9 hours. And I had looked at the wrong name on the data tag, and I had looked at case heaters instead of defrost heaters, because on freezers, usually you have heating elements in the doors that prevent the doors from freezing shut, because there's always a little bit of air and moisture starting there. And then I found it all the way in the end of this whole troubleshooting procedure that I went through, that the defrost heaters were not working. So I looked at my data tag, I saw case heaters, I wired it for 120 volts, and I got the amps, and I was like, I looked at it and I felt like there was something wrong, because usually defrost heaters, they make a certain kind of sound because they're defrosting, and you can hear like sizzling and you can feel a certain heat radiating off of them. And I didn't feel that. So then I went back to the data tag and I saw you had a defrost heater that are running on 208 volts, and they're supposed to be pulling 12 amps instead of 6 amps. So I turned the power off, I rewired it correctly, and I got everything correct. But that is an indication that you need to be at the top of your game pretty much all the time. And even if you're seasoned, there's mistakes that can creep in, especially if it's a long day, especially if you run several calls, if you're not like watching everything. But that is also to say that if you notice something that is off, don't just write it off and say, whatever, it will be fine. Because many times I've found that if I take that mentality and I think that makes a difference between somebody who just starts out and somebody who is seasoned in the field, that they don't go by things that they notice and they really dig deep and find the why and handle that. Because if I would have just said, okay, it's already 8 or 9 p.m., I forgot what time it was, and the defrost heaters, they don't sound that good, but I would have like ignored my own realization, then it might have stayed like that and it would have given an inadequate defrost, and then the freezer would have been a problem in the future and I would have gone there for a recall. So that was another one. And then the third one was inadvertently, but these are all mistakes that happened in the last 2 weeks that people just pointed out on my videos. So I just want to bring it up as, it happens. You just take ownership, you move on with life, you learn something and you keep progressing. But it was in regards to the new refrigerant coming out, the A2L, the flammable refrigerant. Well, it's mildly flammable, but they have new refrigerant sensors, and I had the opportunity to install a system, which I don't do a lot of installs, but I took the opportunity to make a video on the sensors. And what I've been taught in the class that I went to for A2L refrigerants is that the sensor senses a certain amount of refrigerant in the evaporator compartment and it shuts off the unit. Like it just kills the power to the unit. And that would have made sense to me, because the reason behind it that we were taught is that you don't want the flammable refrigerant to spread into the living quarters of the people, which that's perfectly reasonable and that makes sense to me. And oh my God, I got so trashed on the internet because everybody knows that it only shuts off the condenser and the gas furnace and it leaves the blower on. And in some cases, even turns the blower to high speed setting to circulate all the flammable gas and dilute the flammable gas to make it less risky of an explosion or catching something on fire, which I don't know if I agree with that, but there's an overwhelming majority of people that say that. So I tend to believe it, but it is also like you have to learn and really read the manufacturer literature and question things and also learn for yourself, because I can just take it as face value because both explanations do make sense, and you could see it's one way or it's the other way, and it can be either way. So it's really up to you as a technician to educate yourself and learn. And I always try to give the best possible information, but there's multiple viewpoints out in the field. There's multiple people that are teaching. There might be different manufacturers that have different procedures, and one person just knows one manufacturer, the other person just knows the other manufacturer, and they do different things, and then they fight over something where they're both right and they both think that they're not right. So I just wanted to bring it up as a point. Like, if something happens, especially when you're starting out, I made so many mistakes. And the point is just learn from your mistakes, try to minimize them by learning ahead as much as you can and practicing, having somebody that helps you out, having somebody that can teach you, that you can ask questions to. But yeah, don't get discouraged. And yes, I'm learning that lesson over and over now. But that's just something I wanted to bring up. And that was supposed to be my short subject, but now that was already 10 minutes talking about all making mistakes. But anyways, is there any question on that or?
No, it's all clear.
Mm, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty. That's very. It's true. You just have to learn from your mistakes, and that's the way it is, and take ownership, and then it's true. You can fix it. So I think
Mm,
that's a good advice.
yeah. And then that is good. And then the next subject I wanted to take up is low voltage troubleshooting, because I just today went on a call. It was a call back for one of our technicians was out at that job yesterday. And I didn't actually know that. They just sent me there. And I had seen the call on Monday, but then it disappeared. And sometimes that happens, that the customer cancels or whatever. Then I thought, okay, let's go there today. And then I checked in, and then I saw on the log, because sometimes you have the log where you have to check in. I saw one of our technicians had been there yesterday. So whenever I go on a call, especially if I see that it's a callback, I try to get as much information as possible from the staff on site. And then I talked to the manager, and I found out that it was working. But then an hour after our technician left, the unit shut off again. So I went, and I already knew that something was going on. That's probably an intermittent fault. So it doesn't happen all the time. So I was already aware, okay, I probably need to dig deeper. And I also reached out to the technician. I found out what he did yesterday, which helped tremendously to isolate what was going on. And it was a low voltage issue. And it was an intermittent low voltage issue. And it was a short circuit, which means that your low voltage power, you have a transformer that like steps down your voltage from 208 volts to 24 volts, which is your control voltage. And there's a fuse on the transformer, and it was tripped when I arrived. And that was the same thing that happened yesterday. So immediately I know there's either two wires that are touching on the low voltage side that are not supposed to be touching, or there's a wire for 24 volts that's touching to ground where it's not supposed to be touching. And since it was intermittent, I figured it was either a board that was going bad and it was just short circuiting, or it was a coil on a contactor that was wearing out, maybe by overheating over time, or it was a ground fault that we didn't catch yet. So I went through, I turned off the power, and you just take your meter and you put it on ohms, which is resistance, and you just check the different wires. You can check like all your terminals from the thermostat to ground, for example. Like I took all the G, Y, W, R, and all the terminals. I checked the ground. I checked between each other, which is just you should have an open line because you're not supposed to have a connection to ground in most cases, unless you have a contactor on the circuit. Like if you have the Y that's going to your contactor to the compressor, and then the contactor is wired to ground, then you will have the resistance of the coil, which is usually between 8 to 15 ohms resistance. That's what I've experienced. Sometimes it might be a little bit lower, but anyway, so you want to check for that. And then I also checked all our other components. We had a reversing valve. I checked the coil on the reversing valve, and I didn't find anything that was wrong, but I knew that there was a problem. So I just kept looking, and I didn't even do much. And I just kept looking, and I saw that the low voltage control wires were zip tied to the suction line of the compressor. And that is always a spot where, because you have the vibration of the compressor, and then you have the insulation of the wires rubbing against the copper tubing. And it happens so many times in my career that you have a little spot where the insulation is rubbed down all the way to the bare wire, and it makes contact, and then that is a ground fault and it trips the breaker immediately. So I went through and I found one specific spot that had a bare wire, and then I took care of that. And I also found one of the coils on the compressor contactor was wearing out. It was like the resistance was going up between 5 and 6 ohms, which that's very strange, that it should just be one reading. It shouldn't go up and down. So I also replaced the contactor. I turned on the system, everything was working. I observed it, it kept running, and that would explain specifically why it was running, because the wire was a little bit loose. So with the fan running, it might have just moved the wire, and then it would have touched, and then it would have turned off again. So that's just things to look out for when you're troubleshooting, is use your meter and just check connections to ground. It should usually be reading open line, like OL. And also when you're checking compressors, you're supposed to have a specific resistance. If you're getting like weird readings or different readings, or you're not quite sure what you're getting, just do a Google search or do a YouTube search, or just go through, post in the school community, post whatever, a picture. There's an app for this, the school app. You can take it with you on the go. You can post stuff in the community and ask, hey, is this how this is supposed to look like? And even if you're not learning it right on that call and you're coming back the next day to a call, you will have learned something. And yeah, just use the tools and do some research and find out for yourself how to become like a little bit better. Because I heard a really good quote today that was about professionalism. And I thought it was really interesting, because the guy was saying that professionalism or being perfect just means that you have everything right all the time. And he says that's not really attainable, because you can't be perfect all the time. And he said that perfection is the progress of becoming incrementally better every day. And as long as you're beating yourself as you were yesterday, you're basically being perfect or being a professional, because you're just becoming that much better. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to say, because it makes becoming really good at something actually attainable. And that's kind of what I strive for, always learn something new every day. So I just wanted to share that as well. When you're doing troubleshooting, just use your meter, use your tools, just try things out, test things. And if you're not fully sure how it works, ask another technician, or post in the community, watch YouTube videos, or just research a little bit and find out how to use that specific tool so you can get a little bit better every day. And that's just, I think my last, I wanted to make it a little bit longer, but we're already over time. So we're going to end it here, and then maybe we can pick it up next week again. So anyways,
Oh,
that's it, I think, for today.
okay, good. That's good. Okay, well, we'll see you next week. And is it gonna be at night?
Yeah, we'll do it, I think, for like a few times at night and see if people make it, because today was the first time. So I don't know if people forgot about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll do it for a few weeks, maybe like 3, 4, 5 weeks at night, and just see how it goes. Maybe I can find a better lit spot so it makes it a little bit better.
All right.
But yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I'll see you next week then.
Okay. Well, have a
All right.
good one. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.